A few weeks ago, I filmed a vlog where I shared with you guys some of my tips for stealth car camping in cities. However, I won't be sharing that vlog because I think all of those tips are now outdated after the Grants Pass, Oregon versus Johnson Supreme Court case. So I wanted to make an updated video where I both summarize what this Supreme Court case is and means, as well as give you tips for car camping in cities moving forward with these new rulings, as well as discuss how this could possibly be the end of car life as we know it. So if you haven't heard of what Grants Pass, Oregon versus Johnson is, basically Grants Pass, Oregon has a law that states that people are prohibited from sleeping in public places. That includes public benches as well as sleeping in vehicles. And this law was taken to the Supreme Court because people were saying that it goes against the Eighth Amendment, which is against cruel and unusual punishment. And so people were saying this is cruel and unusual punishment because these people have nowhere else to go. Like, they're homeless people in a town where there is no availability in these shelters. But the Supreme Court said, no, that's actually not against the Constitution, and you can totally throw homeless people with nowhere else to go in jail and give them fines and punish them for sleeping in public. And it's up to individual cities to make their own laws and enforce these laws, because it's not the government's problem to deal with the homeless population. It's individual cities' problem. And so I think a lot of people, when they hear about these anti-homelessness laws, they think, oh, well, I have a home in my van, so I'm immune from all of these rules. But actually, if you pay attention to some of the city ordinances, there are rules prohibiting sleeping in your car. And so I think some people in the car camping and van life community are underreacting to this decision, as well as some people might be overreacting to this as well. So this is my perspective on this as someone who's been living out of their car full-time for over 2 years now, and how I see it changing things moving forward. First of all, I think it's important to point out that anti-homelessness laws are nothing new, and the only thing that this Supreme Court case does is allow cities to continue doing this. It doesn't change anything, and cities have been attacking homelessness communities for years. So if you can, I would encourage you to, first and foremost, help the people who are homeless in your community, because those are the people that these laws are going to target first. And I mean, I've already seen it start to happen, especially when I was in Denver recently. There were trash piles of tent communities that law enforcement had come up and just pushed it all into a pile for a dumpster to come pick up later. And so they are trying to clear these communities out and remove them from people's point of view, so that out of sight, out of mind, right? So I would very much encourage you to not let these people in your city just slip under the rug and do something. What? I don't know. That would depend on your local city and the different programs that they have in place, but look into ways that you can volunteer to help. Now, if you've been living out of a vehicle for a while now, you would also know that this is nothing new, and when you park in cities, you always risk the knock. So again, this court case doesn't change anything. It just means that cities can continue doing what they're doing already. And so I personally foresee more cities enacting these types of anti-homelessness laws because they know they can. They're not going to get punished for it. So yeah, I unfortunately see this happening more and more. And so my advice moving forward, before you even open iOverlander to look for a stealth car camping spot in a city, Google the city and Google its anti-homelessness laws, and Google specifically to see if they mention sleeping in vehicles in their laws. Because a lot of these laws are just going to be targeted at the people that are visible, but I already know of some cities that are cracking down on sleeping in vehicles as well. So just because a review from 2 years ago says that you can sleep there on iOverlander, that doesn't mean that the laws haven't changed since then. And so moving forward, I would encourage you to be very diligent about checking the rules and regulations of where you're going, because there's nothing holding them back from giving you a fine, giving you a ticket, or even giving you jail time for sleeping in public places. Now, this video is not going to be a list of cities that ban car camping, because that list is going to be changing every single day. So you have to take it into your own hands and your own responsibility to make sure that where you're sleeping is going to be okay. So if a city that you're going to does have a specific ban on sleeping in public, then this would be my advice. First, see if there are any spaces where you can go just outside of city limits. So think truck stops outside of city limits, think rest areas, think BLM land or National Forest land. We'll come back to National Forest and BLM land at the end of the video, but see if there are places outside of the city limits, and also Google a map of city limits, because if you're outside of the city limits, then the city law enforcement isn't really gonna care, to be honest. So see if you can make your way to the outskirts. Or another thing that I've seen pop up recently is look for businesses that own their real estate. A lot of businesses just rent their real estate from the city. And so if the business, like Walmart, if you want to sleep in Walmart's parking lot, but Walmart is renting their land from the city law enforcement is more likely to be enforcing the laws in that parking lot versus businesses like Cracker Barrel, which own 66% of all of their real estate, so more than half, as well as Bass Pro Shops and other businesses tend to buy their land outright and then put their business on it. So if the business owns their land outright and you call them and get permission to stay overnight for one night, you're usually going to be okay, because the city's law enforcement is going to be more preoccupied enforcing the rules on city property than on private property, especially if the business has already given the green light for you to stay there. And also, if you can't find either of the first two options, then I would recommend looking into 24-hour businesses such as gas stations and truck stops and gyms. Now, a lot of cities that have anti-car camping laws are starting to put parking limits in these 24-hour parking lots. So again, if a parking lot says that you can park there overnight on a review from 2 years ago on iOverlander, make sure you give yourself enough time to go check it out and make sure that no overnight camping signs or no overnight parking or 2-hour limit parking signs have come up since then. So if there's signs posted, it's posted for a reason. Listen to the signs. I think a lot of people think that they're like immune to the rules or whatever. No, if there's a sign posted, don't park there. Anyways, if you look up a city and there are no very strict anti-sleeping in public laws, then you can be a little bit more relaxed. I mean, all of the same rules previously still apply. Like if you can find a place at those spots, those are usually more safe than what I'm about to say, but these are some backups in cities that are less harsh. So I would say still avoid downtown areas. I think downtown areas are where there's bars, it's where there's like sketchy activity going on at 2 a.m. and I just would never park downtown. Yeah, sure, it's convenient, but also the law enforcement is more likely to be there than in some random neighborhood. So I tend to look for neighborhoods. Now, there's a process that I have for it when I'm stealth camping in a city, and usually I will show up to the neighborhood and walk around on foot to just scope it out and get the feel for it during the daytime, to see if I think it would be a good spot. So the things that I usually look for are public spaces, so like walking paths, biking paths, things where, strange people come park there often. It's not suspicious for a strange car to be there. Also, similarly, apartment complexes. If you find street parking near one of those, it's usually pretty typical for random cars to be parking there, so it's less likely for you to stick out. And I also look for large bushes or fences that block the view of the windows in the house from the street, so that it's less likely that the people living there will notice that I'm there at all. So the goal with this is to be super stealthy and to have people not even realize that you're there. And you also want to make sure you pick the neighborhood wisely. You don't want it to be so nice that everybody's parked inside their garages and it's weird for someone to be parked on the street. But you also don't want it to be so sketchy that you are risking getting broken into. So pick a nice little middle-class neighborhood that has a mix of apartments and townhomes and public spaces for people to enjoy, and that is usually my sweet spot. However, in cities that don't have strict bans, I also like to opt for Walmart parking lots because they are very well lit and they always have security cameras. So there's that kind of peace of mind in that aspect. And no matter where you're stealth car camping in a city, these rules always apply. And my phone died, so if the lighting or the angle changed, that's why. But when you're arriving to a stealth car camping spot, it is always important to arrive after dark and before everybody leaves for work in the neighborhood or before the business opens, depending on where you are. I don't necessarily think you have to leave before sunrise. I don't. I'm not a morning person, but it is important for you to get out of there and not get comfy. Because if you stay there too long, then people might start to see, like, oh, that car has window coverings. Did they sleep here last night? And start to get like sus. So it's important to not take advantage of it and respect the people in the neighborhood and the owner of the business and all of that. It's also important to keep your noise and light to a minimum, if not zero. So once you arrive to your spot for the night, you don't want to be flashing bright lights or blaring loud noises, because then that would make it very obvious that someone is in the vehicle. So when you're stealth camping at night, it's very important to make your presence as little known as possible, if that makes sense. Also, super important, don't trash the place. I feel like that's why a lot of places end up getting shut down, is because people just leave their garbage. Or worse, toilet paper. So make sure to clean up after yourself. You don't own that place. Keep yourself self-contained in your vehicle and don't trash the place, because that's how you get it shut down for everybody else. Also, if you see a place that is very trashy in the neighborhood, maybe get a bag and clean it up. So yeah, when stealth car camping in cities, always be respectful of the place and leave it better than you found it. So obviously I'm giving you advice for stealth car camping in cities, so I don't necessarily think that this ruling by the Supreme Court is going to be the end of car camping, but I do think it's the end of car camping as we know it. Because car camping isn't just car camping in cities, car camping is also car camping out in beautiful places in nature, just like this. And the only reason that this is possible is because public lands like national forest and BLM land is still accessible. However, I do foresee that the more cities start to implement these anti-sleeping in public laws, it's going to push more people out to these public lands, which can be a good or bad thing, depending on how they're treated. Unfortunately, a lot of times when homeless camps get driven out of city center, they're forced out to these places and they have no way to transport their garbage anywhere. And so once they've been there a while, it starts to build up. And especially on BLM land, there's very often like dump piles and trash piles. And the more that these public lands also start to get trashed, because sleeping in public in cities is illegal, then more people are going to go out to these public places to sleep. But the more people that are using them, the more likely it's going to get trashed and shut down. And some people might say that I'm overreacting, but this is exactly what's happening in Oregon. Their cities are enacting strict anti-homelessness rules, and these people are being driven out into the national forests and BLM spots, and then these spots are getting shut down, especially around Bend, Oregon, where it's very common for people to just trash a place. So I think another very important part of this video is, if you enjoy car camping, if it's something that you want to continue doing in the future, it's very important for everybody to educate themselves on leave no trace ethics and leave the place better than you found it, because I don't want them to shut these places down. I don't want paid camping to be the only option. I don't want jail time to be the only option if you sleep in public. You know, people should be allowed to sleep for free in places like this. And I don't want that to get shut down just because people like me are showing this lifestyle on the internet and influencing more people to do it as well. You know, there's so many different aspects of this issue that are super important, but ultimately, I think a lot of times the van life community, myself included, tries to separate themselves from the homelessness community and try to say, well, I have a vehicle, that's my home, so I'm not homeless. But in the government's eyes, we're kind of the same. And so I think it's important to pay attention to these rules and not just brush them under the rug, and understand that just because it's not affecting you today doesn't mean it's not an issue. So I think that's why it's important to raise awareness about these things, because the only thing that separates you from them is having a lockable box on wheels. That's it. Or if you live in a house, the only thing separating you from them is one bad month, you know? I think it is really important to raise awareness about this, and if you found this video helpful, or if you learned something from this video, make sure to share it with a friend, and make sure to subscribe down below so that you don't miss my future car camping adventures and see what happens in the future. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, I really appreciate you, and I hope to see you guys again in the next one. Bye!